Lots of teens streaming on devices is no problem with Xfinity. Our gateways are like
magic.
What he said.
Get Amazifying internet for everyone in the house. And see Wicked, only in theaters November 22nd.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Alongside EJ Smith, I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from the link, getting set for the Eagles matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. EJ, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Olivia. It's hard to complain about back-to-back home games, especially this late in the season. It's been a long season and a short season, I feel like. So, I'm excited for the game. I'm excited for the show.
And we're excited to hang out with all of you and to potentially hear from you. You can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. Leave us a question, a comment. We'll be taking some of those toward the end of our show today. And we look forward to seeing you over there throughout the game as well, where we will be interacting with you too. All right, EJ, let us get into the health report, talk a little bit about the health of both of these two teams. The Eagles remarkably healthy in Week 15 if you ignore the injury, the injured reserve list. There's quite a few notable names on there, including Dallas Goedert. He remains sidelined. However, otherwise, Eagles looking pretty healthy. Britton Covey is not playing for a second straight week due to a neck injury. However, everyone else is more or less available to play. We've got Reed Blankenship coming back from a concussion. He missed last week's game. Sidney Brown also coming back as well. He missed last week's game with a knee injury. It's also worth noting that Jalen Hurts has been on the injury report this week dealing with a left ring finger issue. We don't know exactly what that issue is. EJ, what have you seen from Hurts throughout the week as it relates to that ailment?
Yeah, I noticed that he had a wrap on his finger after last Sunday's game, and he had a wrap also on Wednesday when he did his his weekly press conference. So, yeah, I mean, listen, it would be more of a thing if it was Tua Tagovailoa or, even me. I'm left-handed. But for him, I don't think that it really affects a whole lot. I mean, I'm sure that it is painful. He's had finger injuries in the past, obviously on his throwing hand, which is a little bit more significant. But, yeah, he's been a full participant in practice all week, so I don't expect that to really impact him outside of maybe some very specific scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps Kellen Moore might also be more impacted by a left finger injury. As we all know, he was a left-handed quarterback in the NFL. We're still waiting on the inactives list from the Eagles as it stands. Johnny Wilson has been listed as questionable to play for today's game as he's dealt with an illness. He was on the field moments ago, going through some warm-ups, catching some passes. So once we have an update, we will share that with all of you in just a bit. Additionally, Eagles have one practice squad elevation. Fullback Kari Blasingame is up for his second straight game. So Saquon Barkley has a lead blocker for him out of the backfield. We didn't get to see a whole lot of him on offense, but we did get to see quite a bit of Blasingame on special teams where he figures to contribute the most throughout today's game. We'll see how involved he is in this Eagles offensive game plan. Now, on the other side, the Steelers, they have a few big names that are out for today's game. Wide receiver George Pickens is missing his second straight week with a hamstring injury. Defensive end Larry Ogunjobi is missing a game with a groin injury, and safety Deshaun Elliott out with a hamstring injury. These are all starters and impact players for the Steelers, but the name that really sticks out to me the most, EJ, is George Pickens. The fact that he isn't going to be on the field is a big break, I would say, for the Eagles. That said, they still have a number of talented receivers that Russell Wilson will have at his disposal throughout the afternoon. How much do you feel like the offense might change without Pickens in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get to some Steelers stuff later in the show, but I definitely do think it's going to impact it a good amount. I mean, they are a team that likes to take a lot of shots downfield, and Pickens is one of their better downfield targets. He is a very, he's not maybe one of the best receivers in the NFL, but he's kind of in, that next tier of guys who are kind of credible number one receivers. So, yeah, missing him is definitely a big thing, especially for how they like to create plays down the field, or at least they like to hunt for downfield passing plays for sure.
just an update, speaking of receivers, Johnny Wilson is active for today's game. So Eagles get one of their depth receivers who has not been a huge factor in this offense, but is certainly taken some snaps. We'll see exactly how involved he is in today's game. All right, let's transition into our latest headlines. A lot of headlines coming out of this week, EJ, especially as it relates to the Eagles passing game and some of the comments that AJ Brown made in the aftermath of the Carolina Panthers game, Eagles passing game. However you want to read into AJ Brown's comments, there are some legitimate concerns about the Eagles passing game in the aftermath of the Panthers game. They just had 83 net passing yards in that game, which is their second lowest total of the season. And now they're going up against the Steelers defense that has had a lot of success in limiting opposing quarterbacks. What I think stands out to me about this Steelers defense is the fact how often they align in single high safety looks, the second highest rate in the NFL. So to me, that indicates that there might be some opportunities for one-on-one matchups for AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. And we've seen Jalen Hurts have a lot of success in targeting those receivers in some of those one-on-one matchups throughout the season. He trusts his top two receivers to get open when matched up in those one-on-one looks. When you look at this matchup, EJ, what issue do you feel like would you like to see resolved as it relates to the passing game that would give you a little bit more confidence in the entire unit going forward?
Yeah, I think that Jalen Hurts' average time to throw can sometimes be a litmus test for how the passing game looks. Now, he's always going to be on the on the longer side, in terms of time to throw, just because of the nature of him being a scrambling quarterback. He likes to extend plays, and he's good at that. Scrambling quarterbacks typically do have longer average time to throws, but he was at 3.47 seconds on average against the Panthers last Sunday, which was the longest in the NFL that week, and it was like the longest also of his season so far. So I think that is stretched into the danger zone, again, where it's not so much he's creating out of structure and really doing a good job with that. I think it really is speaking more to how infrequently he is able to just make I don't want to call them easy throws, but in rhythm throws, in timing throws, where he is able to step up in the pocket, find an open receiver, and throw it to that receiver. I think, you mentioned the single high looks that they're going to get this game. Maybe that encourages him to hold on to the ball a little bit longer to let routes develop on the outside, but still 3.47 seconds is it's an incredible amount of time. And, I think, the Eagles offensive line can obviously afford him that much time against most teams, but against this Pittsburgh defensive front, that is going to be a challenge. So if you ask me like one thing that I think could be simply, indicative of some progress for the passing offense, I think if Jalen Hurts' time to throw is a little bit more in that like low 3 seconds, a little bit more in line with what we've seen from him throughout most of his career. I think that's probably a sign that the passing game is a little bit more in sync. Again, and that's something even Jalen acknowledged on Wednesday. He said like that he can get the ball out more quickly at times. So I think that's going to be important for this, especially against, again, like I said, this Steelers defensive line.
You use the right word, EJ. Synchronization. That is the word Jalen Hurts used after the game to describe what the passing game, lacked against the Panthers. We'll see if they're able to get on the same page, get into a rhythm. Haven't seen that enough lately, and it would be really important to righting the ship going forward for that group. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Eagles' run game. As we all know, has been the dominant part of the Eagles' offense ever since the bye week. The Eagles have leaned more into a run-first approach. Saquon Barkley, however, doesn't have a really great history against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he talked about it earlier this week. He met Mike Tomlin for the first time back in 2020, the regular season opener, back when Barkley was on the New York Giants. Tomlin's words to him were, "Good luck, you're in for a long night," and he certainly was. He had 6 carries for 15 yards in that game, which was his second lowest yards per carry of his career. However, it's many years later. Saquon Barkley has really proven that he has been the most valuable offseason acquisition for the Eagles, offseason signing, if you will. Plus, the fact that he has been combined with this Eagles offensive line, I think, has really just boded well for the entire Eagles run game. It's been a great marriage. That said, the Steelers' run defense is not one to be taken lightly. They are quite stingy, averaging 91.5 rushing yards against per game, which is the 4th lowest average in the NFL. And I think it really starts right up front with defensive tackle Cam Hayward. This is a really mind-blowing stat to me per Next Gen Stats. The Steelers' defense has allowed on average more than 2 more yards per carry with Hayward off the field than when he is on the field this year. So when you take into account the fact that the Steelers' run defense has had a lot of success, how likely is it that the Eagles will still try to impose their will regardless of their strength on the other side of the ball?
Yeah, Cameron Hayward is kind of like the Steelers' version of Brandon Graham. Like, he just keeps getting better as he gets older and older. But I mean, yeah, he's a super important part for that defensive front. I feel like, we talked a couple weeks ago, when the Eagles are about to play the Ravens, about how this Eagles offense can still run the ball even against really, really highly rated run defenses. I think because of, again, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly why, but I think it speaks to the fact that the offensive line is so much more talented than what most teams will have, and the run game is more varied. They don't have like one thing that they lean on. They have a lot of different options, so they can kind of figure out what works against just about anybody. I think also Jalen Hurts being +1 in the run game is a big factor. I think that can be a big factor against the Steelers as well. So yeah, I think that they can still try to run the ball. I think they're going to have to stick with it against a run defense like this. It might not look great in the first quarter. It might not look good early on. And, it might take some time to kind of wear them down. But we've seen the Eagles do that to teams. We've seen them kind of get off to sluggish starts. The run game isn't really hitting like they want it to. But by the second half, Saquon Barkley is breaking off explosive runs. So I don't think that they can get away from it. I think that there might be challenges presented by the fact that, as good as the Ravens run defense was, I think it's fair to say that this Steelers front is at least more talented. Maybe the numbers don't bear that out, but I think in general, like the one-on-one matchups these guys are going to be real challenges for them. So again, I think that they need to stick with it. I think that they need to be patient with it, but I do think it probably will be challenging in the early going.
As we discussed going into that Ravens game, that was a very good unit. Barkley is, at least at the moment, and they're playing the Giants today, so I don't think anything has changed so far, but Barkley is the only ball carrier to average over 100 or to post over 100 rushing yards against the Ravens. So that is, it speaks a lot to the fact that they have been able to impose their will, and wouldn't surprise me if they try to do the same thing today. All right, let's take a look on the other side of the sideline there, the Steelers and their run game, because they have a solid one as well. We've already talked about one of the Eagles' top priorities on defense is going to be to try to take away that deep shot that Russell Wilson has perfected over the course of his career, but also they're going to want to stop the run too. The Steelers ranked 2nd in rushing attempts and 9th in rushing yards in the league. And last week, Najee Harris, he had a really great day against the Cleveland Browns. Granted, it is the Browns. He had recorded a season-high 50% forced missed tackle rate across 16 carries, according to Next Gen Stats. And if you look on the look back to last week, the Eagles had, I think, it was maybe a little bit of an under the radar struggle, but they struggled last week in trying to bring down Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard. He forced 10 missed tackles and ultimately was able to gain significant yardage on the ground against an Eagles run defense that has been pretty sound, especially since the bye week. You think back to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game where they were missing tackles left and right. They've really been able to cut down on that. And this past weekend against the Panthers, they struggled a little bit more. So when you look at the talent across the board for this Steelers offense, how do you feel like the Eagles might try to distribute their resources in trying to both take away those deep shots, but also make a solid effort in stopping the run?
Distributing resources is a good way to put it, because the Steelers like to use a lot of heavy formations. They have, their multiple tight end sets. They obviously have invested a lot in their offensive line. And then they have Darnell Washington, who is kind of like a, half of an offensive lineman, half of a tight end, I would call him. I think that if he committed to just playing offensive tackle, he might, be a very good offensive tackle if he just put on a little extra weight. So yeah, they can really come out in these big formations. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles match up with them, because obviously Cooper DeJean has been a big part of this defense. And, if they come out in 13 personnel, again, with massive tight ends on the field, do they trust Cooper DeJean to kind of stay on the field, kind of to be like that pseudo second or third linebacker, depending on if they use odd fronts? And I think this will be a big game for Jordan Davis. I think him playing as a nose tackle against, those heavy personnel sets will be important. So I think it really probably starts with the defensive line being able to operate. Again, I'm curious to see how they match up with this, but and then on the back end, I think they just have to keep being as solid in coverage as they have been for most of the season. Obviously, Reed Blankenship coming back will be really important for that. So yeah, I think, I'm not really sure how it's going to look, but I'm really curious to see how those first couple drives play out with the way that the Steelers like to set up offensively.
All right, let us transition into the best zone, our favorite part of the show, the fan zone. Got lots of comments from you over on inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day and all over our site. So we'll talk about some of the things that are on your mind right now. So let's take this first one here from Flick Lives. They say 10 wins is a bridge too far. The perpetual slow starts will not be overcome. I hope that I am wrong, but my pessimism as a 50-year Eagles fan, that is a long time, tells me to expect a Steelers win 21-20. We'll get into our predictions a little bit later on. However, EJ, I want to stick on this talking point of the Eagles' slow starts. They have been a pain in their side throughout the entire season. The Eagles have averaged just 1.3 points in the first quarter of games this year, which is last in the NFL. And I went through earlier this week and looked at just how many negative plays, sacks, or penalties the Eagles have taken on their first drives of the game. 8 of 13 opening drives for 62%. Numbers, that doesn't sound very good to me. I don't know how it sounds to you, but it's been tough to watch. It has taken them a long time to get going. That said, they generally, with an 11-2 record, they have found a way to get going, and they have found a way as games go on to score and to heat up. But that said, EJ, do you feel like this is something that could come back and bite them if they don't get it ironed out?
I certainly do. I think it's one of the biggest questions remaining this season is, are they going to be able to figure out how to get, off to quicker starts, and, what game is it going to be? I think it's only a matter of time before they fall into a hole that kind of changes the way that they can operate. I mean, maybe that's a little bit overblown. Maybe they can lean on the run game. Again, the fact that Saquon Barkley can be so explosive in the run game can kind of bail them out a little bit. But I do think, this is a team that is built to get a lead and protect the lead. And we haven't seen them do that very often because they haven't been able to get off to quick starts. We've talked to players about it. They mentioned that they get a lot of unscouted looks because of how unique their offensive personnel are. It's not often the teams have to account for players like A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley and the offensive line the Eagles have. So I do think that explains it a little bit, but just because it's unpredictable doesn't mean that they can't get off to a solid start. They can't, just be able to win matchups. So I think that, the negative plays are a big part of it. It's a really good stat pull by you. So yeah, I do. I think it's like I said, it's one of the biggest questions remaining for them going into this latter part of the season.
All right. Thanks so much for that question/comment. Let's take this one here from R. Chang. They say Cooper DeJean got schooled a bit by a wily veteran in Adam Thielen last week against the Panthers, which is how the NFL works. He still got the dub, and after studying the game film, DeJean is already a better slot cornerback than he was on Sunday. DeJean perhaps had, in a weird way, maybe his welcome to the NFL moment, his welcome to the NFL game this past weekend against Adam Thielen, who had 4 receptions for 49 yards when lined up in the slot against Cooper DeJean. He made some really important plays on third down and ultimately was critical to at least their being able to hang in there against the Eagles throughout the game. But that said, DeJean, it's another game. He's trying to turn the page. Has his talking to him this week, he said that he felt like he wasn't physical enough with Adam Thielen, which is honestly not something that has been an issue for him in recent weeks. I think if you think about some of the big plays that Cooper DeJean has made, it has come down to his physicality. When you think about his hit on his Derrick Henry, his matchup against Cooper Kupp in the Rams game, I thought he was very physical in that matchup. You even go back to the Bengals game with his big 4th down stop on Jamar Chase. Again, very physical and being able to make that tackle. How confident are you in DeJean's ability to learn from his mistakes, move on, and correct himself going into today's game against the Steelers?
Yeah, I'm fairly confident. I mean, it's like this is kind of the norm for rookies. Obviously, it's kind of a testament to how well Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean have played that it's kind of surprising that, Cooper DeJean didn't have a good game. I think, when coming into the season, I would have expected this to be the case at certain times. I think that, the fact that it took this long is really a testament to how well they've played. I mean, if we're going to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, matchups against somebody like Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, that might make you a little bit more nervous after seeing that Adam Thielen matchup not go Cooper DeJean's way. But we also have seen him play really well against the Rams, slot receiver rotation of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So I think it kind of cuts both ways. I think that if it becomes a trend, we might need to be maybe a little bit more concerned, but I'm willing to give the rookie one game where he's not, making major plays and kind of taking, good receivers out of the game. I don't think that we're there. I don't think we're quite there yet.
I think what has been most impressive about both of them is that they very rarely make the same mistake twice, especially with Quinyon Mitchell. So I feel good. We'll see about how he does, but I think he'll learn from what he did wrong and his ability to adjust in game a little bit better than he did last week. All right, let's take this last one here from Ziller. They say, my thinking is that the Steelers are going to focus on stopping Saquon Barkley and try to let Hurts beat them passing. They are going with Pittsburgh. They do not trust Jalen Hurts. I know we've talked about this a little bit, EJ, about how the Steelers might approach the Eagles offense. This is tricky because, yes, the Eagles are coming off of a bad passing game, but I don't think this has been a bad passing game all season long. We have seen good things. We have seen good things from Jalen Hurts and his connections with A.J. Brown, with Devontae Smith, no Dallas Goedert in today's game. So it's been very rare that he's had his full complement of receivers. That said, there's more than enough there for him to get the job done today. If it comes down to Hurts, do you think he is capable of leading them to victory?
The track record in the last month, it makes it hard to really say that with a lot of confidence. Obviously, we've seen him play really well at points in his career, but I do think that this shift to the run first approach and, probably this emphasis on avoiding turnovers has had like a ripple effect on his confidence levels. Maybe confidence isn't the right way to phrase it, but just the amount of times where he's willing to take risks down the field have gone down considerably. So, I think that they've got a couple of weeks here to figure it out. I think it's going to be an important thing. It's noteworthy. Like A.J. Brown talking this week said, like, I'm not taking back the fact that the passing game needs to be better. I want attention on that. So, now there's a lot of attention on it. It's a good defense, it's a good Steelers defense. I think that, they have to, this is going to be very instructive, this matchup, on how it's going to look against some of the better teams in the NFL. Obviously they've got a couple of games against in division. They're always harder games than you expect them to be, but this is really like the hardest test left on the Eagles schedule before the postseason. I think we're going to learn a lot about where the passing game is just because of that matchup.
I agree. I'm eager to see how this one plays out because, I'm not super confident in the competitive level of these remaining 3 games afterwards. Eagles got the Commanders, the Cowboys, and then the Giants to close out the season. All right, let's transition into our player picks. EJ, if there's any particular player that you're most interested in seeing how they perform in today's game, or maybe not a player, maybe someone else, who would it be?
It's almost like you checked the script. I decided to push the boundaries of the question a little bit, kind of go out, think outside the box. That's just the type of guy I am, Olivia. I always like to think outside the box. I'm going to go with Kellen Moore today. I am very curious to see how the passing game looks, not just player execution wise. I want to see what it looks like schematically. I want to see what the concepts they use are. I think one thing that we've noticed in the last month is that they've really begun to pare down what they do. You think about that season opener against the Packers where there was so much pre-snap motion and there were really good concepts that scheme guys open. We haven't seen very much of that in recent weeks. It seems like they really are running just a very limited menu of passing plays. If that's to maybe build confidence for Jalen Hurts, kind of simplify things for him. I'm not sure, but I think like the amount of times we saw the RPO to slant route to A.J. Brown against the Panthers, it got to the point where the Panthers even knew. Like the Panthers were literally sitting on it. We were sitting up here in the press box pretty much expecting it to happen. So I want to see if they start to diversify what they do a little bit in the passing game, schematically. And I think that could be a major question going down the stretch of the season. So, like I said, I know it's not actually a player, but I want to see how Kellen Moore does today, kind of trying to mix things up.
Related, I would say, my player to watch is A.J. Brown. I think for good reason, for all of the reasons we have already discussed. He raised the red flag last week against the Panthers about the Eagles passing game, and he has a good reason to. It was not a good game for the group, and it was not necessarily even a good game for him. He only had 4 receptions for 43 yards, which is his second lowest total of the season. That number could have been a lot greater. There were plenty of opportunities for Jalen Hurts to throw A.J. Brown the ball his way, even on some other opportunities where the ball ended up going elsewhere and there was, ended up being a touchdown or completion to someone else. But Hurts made it a little bit more difficult. A.J. probably would have been the easier target on that play. Instead, Jalen Hurts went elsewhere with the ball. So is the ball going to Brown when it's supposed to be? And then also my question too, EJ, to your point, is will Kellen Moore be able to just like manufacture a few more early touches for players like A.J. Brown just to get the ball in their hands, get the confidence up, and to not necessarily lean so much on those like ISO ball plays that we have seen the Eagles try to lean on a lot in the past. And Even then, those opportunities were there occasionally against the Panthers too. Will Hurts just, trust his receiver to make a play? I think that's the big question for me going into today's game. All right, let us transition into our predictions. We're going to take out the crystal ball. And to do that, I am pleased to welcome in Inquirer reporter Jeff McLean. Jeff, it's great to see you. Before you give your prediction, I am curious to know, what is your matchup to watch for today's game?
Well, getting back to Jalen Hurts, but not as much with the arm, more so about his legs and his ability to make plays, scrambling when there isn't an option throwing the ball, or he doesn't see someone open. And he's been very, productive doing that, obviously throughout his entire career, but also during this kind of dry spell with the passing game. And, he's had a lot of big runs on third down where he's been able to convert, but he's going up against a defense that may do the best job in the league in terms of limiting mobile quarterbacks from breaking free. And we've seen the Steelers do this against one of the best in Lamar Jackson. They held him to 0 scramble yards, and they also did it to a younger version of that in Jaden Daniels when Pittsburgh had faced the Washington Commanders earlier this year. So that, if I'm the Eagles, I'm a little concerned about that, because obviously the passing game and Jalen's ability to throw the ball downfield hasn't been quite there the last month or so, but he's been able to kind of compensate with the scrambles. And, the Steelers do that a number of different ways. They play a lot of contained football on those types of downs, but Patrick Queen's their 3-down linebacker, and a lot of that responsibility falls on him in terms of spying the quarterback. So I'm definitely kind of keyed in on how, Queen will do in that regard, and how Jalen will, basically attack them, and whether he can be able to run the ball in this game.
Mine, Jeff, what is your final score prediction for the game?
Yeah, I had to be the bad guy again amongst the Inquirer scribes when it comes to picking the Eagles games. Of course, I've been wrong too. So shame on me, right? You guys have done better than I have in terms of picking games. But, I'm going with the Steelers. Just the matchups, I think, kind of favor them. I mean, I am a little worried about my pick based upon, the fact that there is no George Pickens, as you guys talked about earlier, and how so much of the offense is the Steelers is like, passing the ball deep down the field. And when your best big play guy is not on the field, and you really don't have anything else that kind of scares you in that regard, I wonder if the Steelers are going to be able to put up any points on this Eagles defense, considering the way that they've played. But, the Steelers defense, there's just no joke. I mean, TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith and Nick Herbig and obviously Cameron Hayward has been there, and it kind of just gets better with age. Those guys against, obviously one of the better offensive lines in the league, that's going to be a good matchup. It's strength versus strength. So maybe the Eagles are able to kind of hold them off that way. But I'm just, at this point, I know, they got to get Jalen Hurts back to how he was throwing the ball previously, or whenever it may have been. But I don't think this is a good week for it, and that's why I think it's going to be hard for him to throw the ball. When in reality, this is the type of team where you want to do that, because they play a lot of man, they play a lot of single high safety, and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith should have matchups down the field. So it could obviously go the other way, but I think I see a defensive slugfest, a low scoring game, and I have the Steelers winning 20-17.
All right, EJ, where is your head going into today's game?
Yeah, Jeff said a lot of what I wanted to say. I feel like this has the makings of a low-scoring game. I feel like it's probably going to be an ugly game. The Steelers play, like, stylistically, their defense is probably what the Eagles would like to see in terms of, like, the scheme that they run. It's a lot of single high, it's a lot of man coverage. You'd think that they'd be able to win those matchups, but honestly, the personnel is kind of nightmarish. Like Jeff mentioned, they have so much talent up front. Micah Fitzpatrick on the obviously playing as that, like, center field safety. Their corners aren't great. So I think, like, if the passing game can take a leap, I think there might be an opportunity for the Eagles to run away with this one. But I see this more as a toss-up. I picked the Steelers 23-20. Maybe that score is even a little bit ambitious for how I think these two defenses are going to play today.
All right. Well, I'm zagging from all of you. I'm going with the Eagles 24-21. I think, again, as Jeff already mentioned, I feel like the fact that the Steelers are missing arguably their top weapon in the passing game in George Pickens. I think that is a huge break for the Eagles, particularly in trying to limit Russell Wilson's ability to throw the ball downfield. He has become known for his ability to throw the moon ball. And I think the fact that Pickens isn't going to be in the game is going to take a little bit off their plate in that regard. And I also have, if for whatever reason Hurts cannot rebound in the passing game and it doesn't look great, I still have a lot of confidence that Saquon Barkley can get it done on the ground. You know, we talked about this Ravens defense a few weeks ago and how difficult of a group they are, and they are, but Barkley still was able to have success on the ground, and to go for over 100 rushing yards is no joke. So I think the Eagles can find a way to get it done as long as they do not beat themselves. And I think that was a big issue last week against the Panthers, that they need to have a lot less self-inflicted mistakes in today's game, particularly in the passing game, if they want to even try to outperform last week's performance, for lack of a better word. And I think that after everything they went through this week, perhaps they can get it done. We'll see. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Just a reminder, you can head on over to inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, as we will be chatting with you throughout the game in real time, answering your questions and picking your brain on all things going on during the game. So we look forward to seeing you over there.
And please keep up with more Eagles coverage on my podcast. I'm covering the Birds with new episodes dropping every week. Listen to wherever you get your podcasts, or go to inquirer.com/podcast.
Once again, that is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning into Game Day Central, and we'll see you next time.